Hi guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be building this Battle of Berlin diorama, and I'm going to be using this T-34 85 model which I built about a year ago, and this is from Academy. This model isn't quite finished yet, it hasn't got any weathering and I haven't added the bed spring armour. And I'm going to be combining this with ICM's Soviet tank riders and one or two figures from this German Volkssturm fighter set. I have a number of Miniart kits which represent ruined German buildings. I'm going to be using one of these in the diorama, and I'm going to be building the rest of the buildings using XPS foam. So the first thing I wanted to do was to extend the walls that Miniart give you. So I chose this 12mm XPS sheet and I just marked it out to make a collapsed wall which would join the Miniart wall. And by cutting this sheet diagonally I can actually get two separate walls from it, which is quite handy. So I just used a ruler and a sharp knife to make the horizontal marks for the brickwork, and then just manually did the vertical marks. And I tried to make sure the bricks were the same size as some of the pre-made bricks which I actually bought a while ago. And then to give it a little bit more texture, I just took some of those bricks and just pushed them gently into the foam, just to give a little bit of variation in height to the wall surface. And then a screwed up ball of aluminium foil is a really good way of just, again, generating a little bit more texture on the surface. So at this point I was happy with the main brickwork, but not really with the edge where the wall has crumbled away. So the first thing to do was to try to just pull away with my hand or with a knife any of the more curved parts of that edge which don't really look like sharp bricks. Again, I use the aluminium foil technique. And then I also cut some missing bricks out of there just to make the surface a little bit more uneven. So one of the things which is a bit annoying about the Miniart buildings is the doors tend to be really large. If you compare it with this figure here, it looks a little bit too big. So what I'm going to do is dig a little trench into the XPS base and just sink this wall slightly into the base to reduce the height. And that will actually have the bonus of making it more stable when I attach the wall to the base as well. And I also took a piece of styrene sheet with a pre-made grid pattern on it, and I used that to represent a kind of tiled floor inside this building. So when I originally built these Miniart kits probably over a year ago, I didn't do a brilliant job, so the edges definitely need tidying up. And I also took this opportunity to add a little bit of household filler to the surface of the styrene sheets, just to give a little bit more texture where there's no brickwork. Once they're primed in black, the walls look pretty good. And then I just gave a base layer of grey for the plaster and XF9 for the brickwork. And then I used a coat of worn effects and a darker coat of grey paint to try to represent chipped paint showing through to the plaster. That didn't really work out the way it was supposed to, but it does at least provide a little bit of colour variation. So I used 4 different browny, orangey, reddy colours to pick out individual bricks and just break up the monotonous colour of the brickwork. So I thought it would be nice to have a little crater in the corner of the base with a little broken pipe in it and maybe a puddle forming there from that pipe as well. I just used a plastic straw for the pipe. And then the road that you can see here is actually the base that comes with the Miniart buildings. I've just cut it up a little bit, and I have cut the pre-made bricks that I've got into the same size as the stones on the base, and I'm just going to use those to give the impression of that brickwork falling down into the crater after like a shell strike or something. AK Interactive's Dry Ground is a great little product for general texture. And of course all of this is going to be painted later, so it doesn't matter that I've got the black road and the yellow dry ground and the red bricks. All of it will be painted later on. And here I use some sculptor mould to attach the walls to the base, and also to add a few other little bits and pieces. So this diorama is going to need a lot of debris, and I've got a few different bits and pieces I can use for that. This is my tub of plaster bricks. I've made these using a couple of brick molds, and I basically just keep these handy whenever I need some debris. So these are going to be liberally sprinkled onto the diorama. I also have these chunks of plaster which look a little bit like masonry. I made these for a previous project, but I might use them here as well. Before I got my brick molds, I did actually buy some quite expensive commercial bricks, so I'll be putting some of those in there as well to try and use those up. And I actually stuck some of those bricks together because obviously bricks don't fall off destroyed buildings one by one, they come down in big chunks, so I've tried to simulate that here. Also, a while ago I did buy this Tamiya brickwork kit, which is not very good, so I've decided I'm going to chop these pieces up and maybe just sprinkle a few of those in as well. And finally, on the brick front, I have a couple of wall molds, and I've just broken these up into small pieces again to represent chunks of masonry and brickwork. And then finally, in terms of debris, the Miniart kits are really good at including lots and lots of bits and pieces, window frames, shutters, doors, fences, etc. And I'll be using some of those definitely within my debris field. And then really for the creation of the debris, it was just a case of using some sculptor mold to get the basic shape, and then just sprinkling the items I've just described liberally all over them, trying to embed them down into the sculptor mold where possible, but also for any loose items I'll go over later with some PVA glue. And then once the large pieces were on, I just sprinkled some fine plaster dust over it just to break things up a little bit. And then I went over everything with a 50-50 mix of PVA glue and water just to really solidify things. And I think at this stage, apart from the slightly unusual blend of colours, this was looking really quite nice. It looks really like a destroyed street to me. Obviously the centre area is quite empty, but that's where the tank's going to be anyway, so I don't want to put too much debris there. And then once the PVA glue was dry, I gave everything a coat of XF69, which is NATO black. And then on top of that, I gave a few areas of the rubble and all of the pavement a slightly lighter dark grey colour. I then sprayed a little bit of XF9, which is a dark red colour, to some of the brickwork, and some XF52 flat earth to represent some of the dirt that might have been thrown up from that shell crater in the road. At this point I used the same 4 colours which I used for the building walls, just to highlight a few individual bricks in the rubble, just to break up the colours. And also at this point I painted some of the details like the broken window frames in the debris and the iron fences outside as well. So to paint the road I went for a sponge technique with a semi-dry sponge and just sort of dabbing on some grey paint. I think with hindsight it didn't come out brilliantly, but I think overall it didn't look too bad either. There's a little bit of a raised area in the middle of the road now where the base has come back up, but luckily that will be covered by the vehicle anyway. I used a dark brown oil paint with some enamel thinner to add a little wash between the cobblestones on the road. And I also highlighted a few of the cobblestones there just to discolour them. And after that was dry, I added a grey wash in a few areas as well. Originally I did plan to use some washes on the rubble areas as well, but the absorbency of the material that I used for the rubble just meant that even with a varnish the wash didn't flow properly. However, one area where the wash was useful was just to cover up anything that might still be showing through the original primer, because it was quite hard to reach with the airbrush. And then I taped up the area where the crater is and added some Woodland Scenics realistic water. And this needs building up in layers with each one less than 3mm. And then finally it was time to add the vehicle, the figures, and a few other bits and pieces like equipment, weapons and so on. And here is the finished diorama. So overall I'm really happy with the way this turned out. This was my first time making any kind of significant buildings from the XPS foam rather than just using the Miniart buildings, so I'm really happy with the way they turned out. I'll definitely be doing more of those in the future. And overall I really like the dark tone of the diorama as well. It's exactly what I was aiming for. So yes, I had a lot of fun building this, and I'm definitely going to be building a few more dioramas in the future. So as always, thank you very much for watching. If you would like to see more diorama builds or vehicle builds, then please do hit subscribe. And if you liked this video, then please help other people to find it by hitting the thumbs up button down below. Thank you very much, until next time.